Lab leak most likely caused pandemic.
The conclusion on the headline isn't actually supported by the context of the article. How is that legal?
I know, right? People need to get over the fact that they're just reading bumper stickers.
The word for China is 中国, which means the center kingdom.
We have a ton to cover with China. So I'm just going to kick it off. I don't even know where to start. But,
I know, that's how it feels, right?
Right?
That's exactly how it feels.
But it seems like China's goal is global domination, or at least they want to become the next superpower, the next global superpower. I think a good place to start is recently in the news. It's been everywhere. Have you heard this? Lab leak most likely caused pandemic, Energy Department says. That's from the New York Times.
Yeah, no, this is a fantastic example of, it's a fantastic example of how bad the government is sometimes at doing their own job.
Yeah.
Right? So the Department of Energy basically ran a study, and then they weren't careful enough in the use of their terminology. And then a line out of place essentially turns into this gigantic media frenzy that is essentially trying to say that the government is confirming that the coronavirus came from a lab in China.
Yeah.
I think this is a fantastic place to start because multiple government agencies have looked into this and have reviewed the findings that the Department of Energy used to make their statement. And they've all confirmed that there is not enough evidence to be able to refute or deny that coronavirus is either natural or man-made from a lab. But the Department of Energy did their own thing, right? Didn't properly vet it, didn't properly communicate it. So we've got this open question now about, is the government trying to hide something? Can we say that it was developed in a lab? Whatever else it might be. It's important to me because there's a lot of, rightfully so, there's a lot of very concerned and upset people about COVID, right? About coronavirus or the novel coronavirus that became COVID-19's, causing factor. And it's been a core facet of our lives, whether we like it or not, for the better part of 45 months, I think. Like it's a long time.
It's been a long time. Real quick before we dive into this, because I want to hit coronavirus.
For sure.
So this is, we've been talking about, I've talked about it, you've talked about it, I've heard it on interviews, how the media is essentially just a bunch of bullshit nowadays. And so here, this is just one article that I pulled up. I pulled up New York Times, and like I said, the headline is Lab Leak Most Likely Caused Pandemic, Energy Department says. Then if we read here, new intelligence has prompted Energy Department to conclude that an accidental laboratory leak in China most likely caused the coronavirus pandemic through U.S. spy agencies remained divided over the origins of the virus, American officials said on Sunday. The conclusion was a change from the department's earlier position that it was undecided on how the virus emerged. Then this is where it gets interesting. Some officials briefed on the intelligence said that it was relatively weak and that the Energy Department's conclusion was made with low confidence, suggesting its level of certainty was not high. While the department shared the information with other agencies, none of them changed their conclusion, officials said. So I'm not going to read the entire article, but that just goes to show you that you can't just read the headlines.
Exactly right, especially not when it comes to intelligence or anything based on intelligence. So you heard a couple of words in there, right? We heard the word likely, and then we heard the word confidence. There's a grid when professional intelligence agencies collect intelligence, they have to run that intelligence through a grid, like a vetting process, so that when they communicate to somebody else, they can communicate using the same terminology. So if you're NSA, I'm CIA, somebody else is DIA, we all have our own language inside our departments. I mean, you know as well as I do, the military has its own language, CIA has its own language. It's really hard for two people from different agencies to have a straightforward conversation. So when you talk about intelligence, they create tools so that we can communicate in common terms. Likeliness and confidence are two of those terms that are pretty well structured so that all the different agencies can communicate transparently with each other. Problem is, it only works with each other. It doesn't work with the media. So likeliness has to do with how probable something is. Confidence has to do with the way you vetted the information itself. So something can be high likely, like highly likely, and high confidence. That means it's a high probability, and we have strong faith in the information. Something can also be very likely, but we have low confidence in the information, right? So it means we do believe that there's a high probability this is what happened, but the information that we have to support that conclusion is very weak. We can also have situations where something is not likely, and we have high confidence in the information, right? And all of that changes the probabilities. So when agencies speak to each other, which is what you were just reading, right? DOE was talking to other intelligence agencies, and they're all divided because some say that it had high likelihood, and some say that it was low confidence. That's them speaking a language that the average person doesn't understand. And then you throw in the New York Times, they just want to get you to click on the headline.
Yep.
And then the conclusion is bogus. The conclusion on the headline isn't actually supported by the context of the article.
Yeah.
How is that legal?
I know, right? It's people need to get over the fact that they're just reading bumper stickers
All the time.
That's all it is. It's
That's a
just bumper
fantastic way of
sticker,
putting it.
you know. But back to China. What are your thoughts? Was it in a lab?
So
Was this an act of war?
I will say no. I do not think it was an act of war.
Okay.
Yeah, very good, right? My understanding from my own education and my own experience with the Chinese is that culturally, the Chinese are completely different than Americans, right? Americans and Chinese alike, we think like our culture. It doesn't matter whether you're gender specific, whether you're gender neutral, whether you're old, young, educated, uneducated, doesn't matter the color of your skin. Americans think like Americans. We think through a lens of capitalism and opportunity and equality and fairness and freedom. We all think through that. We just might disagree on exactly what it looks like. Chinese people also all think through a Chinese lens. And part of that Chinese lens is a 5,000-year history of being Chinese. A big part of that lens is bringing honor to your family name. Being the person who protects the honor that your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents have put into protecting your family name and not being the one to ruin it, right? In the United States, we love change. I love the fact that I am changing the future of my last name. That's not the same to a Chinese person. Many ways, if they're going to change, if they're going to take a risk to change their family heritage, they're also risking failing. And if they fail their endeavor, it's going to bring dishonor to their family name. So they're a completely different mindset than Americans, right? Another part of that Chinese lens is this idea that China, in Chinese, the word for China is Zhongguo, which means the center kingdom. So everything the Chinese do, everything the Politburo does, everything senior Chinese officials think of is all through this lens of China being the center kingdom. It doesn't mean they have to be. It doesn't mean they have to be rulers of the world, but they do have to be the biggest kingdom. So superpower, the modern day superpower idea, fits them culturally very, very well. There can be other powers, but they are the most powerful.
Okay.
Right? There can be other countries, but they're in the center of everything. When we think about how they set up their model of supply chain management, when you think about how they've consolidated rare earth minerals, and you think about how they've consolidated intellectual property from all over Europe and Latin America and the United States, you can see they centralize everything. It's called the central party. Like they centralize. They want to put themselves at the center of the hub and spoke. That's very different than the United States, right? We want to be the thing that breaks the wheel. So culturally, they have this need to, this predisposition to being the center of it all, being the most powerful, but not the world police. They don't want everybody to be a communist party. We want every other country to be a democracy. That's failed us I don't know how many times. How many Gulf Wars did we go through because we couldn't make that happen?
Yeah.
They don't want everybody to be a communist country, but they do want to be the most powerful country and be communist themselves.
Why do you think? I love everything you just said, but it doesn't answer my question. Why do you think that? What makes you believe that the coronavirus was not released and was not an act of war with everything else that they have going on? I'm just going to run through some stuff. These are all categories I want to talk about. But, to me, on top of all this stuff, I'll get to it. So, they own the supply chain. Then there's the fentanyl crisis. They're aiding the cartels with the fentanyl crisis. They're buying up our farmland. They're influencing our politicians. They're influencing big tech. Then we have the TikTok debacle. We have the spy balloons that have been flying over the U.S. We got the propaganda war. They're trying to take Taiwan. They're settling Africa. They were there to negotiate with Afghanistan before we ever even pulled out. Then there's the lab leak, supposedly. So it seems like, and I'm sure there's more that I'm not thinking of, but with all these things happening, there's the race to AI, which he's already said the person that wins the race to AI is going to achieve global domination. With all these things that they have in place and they're winning on, what makes you think that the coronavirus was not an act of war? On top of that, why they were never held accountable ever by anybody in the world. It was like the Chinese just got a free pass and they just the world is a complete disaster right now.
Yeah. No, I get it. So I would say there's three reasons I don't think it was an act of war. The first is that China, their strategic MO is to do things quietly, not to do things loud and noisy. Coronavirus, the way it happened, was loud and noisy. It broke out in their country first, and then they tried to get it under control. And the world knew there was a virus in China that they were trying to control. That's not quiet, right? Everything else on that list, from hypersonic missiles to the AI war to growing infrastructure in Africa, that's all quiet. You have to look to find that. You didn't have to look to find out about the coronavirus outbreak. The second reason I don't think it was an intentional act of war is because where did swine flu come from? China. Where did bird flu come from? China. China has a history of unsanitary experimental conditions where novel natural viruses are born and spread. And I don't mean this is a 50-year history. I mean, this is like a 15-year history. Bird flu, swine flu, coronavirus, which was another coronavirus is a type of flu virus, right? These were all novel viruses originating in China that spread around the world. China was never held accountable for any of them, but at the same time, it's a pattern of behavior, right? It's a pattern that shows disgusting unsanitary conditions. If you've ever gotten a chance to see even just a Chinese restaurant in China, it's filthy. Like, they do not have the health and sanitation standards we have in the United States. They don't have to. Their population is different. Their culture is different. Everything's different. So it's a petri dish for disgusting things to happen and for new natural evolutions of viruses to take place. So because of that track record, coronavirus behaved exactly the same way as the other viruses. A breakout in China that spread throughout the world. And then the third reason that I don't believe it was an act of war is because China will pull the trigger when they want something. But they pull that trigger at a strategically beneficial point, like they did in Hong Kong, right? When they took Hong Kong, China took Hong Kong in weeks. They pulled the trigger when everything was lined up and everything was ready. They made a decisive action and they took it, and the world had nothing to say about it, right? When China moves on Taiwan, and I fully expect China will move on Taiwan before we've identified our next president, right?
I 100% agree with that.
They will make that move. It will be decisive. It will be fast. it will be backed by multiple secondary and tertiary support efforts. It will not be a debacle like COVID was. These are all the reasons why I don't believe it was an act of war. Could they have been developing biological antigens, biological weapons, or biological defense? They could have been, possibly. Everything's a possibility, right? I would even say that could be that could be in the place of like 40 to 70% probable. But we don't have any information to support that. Maybe it's out there and we just haven't seen it. But for me, when I take a look at all the data that I do have, I see the history of swine flu, bird flu. I see the history of how they operate in Hong Kong, and I see the fact that coronavirus was handled like a freaking disaster. That does not strike me as an intentional act of war.
Why do you think there was no repercussions?
So my guess is that the reason that we haven't seen repercussions is because of what happened when it hit the democratic world. You can't. Let's just look at the United States. It's easy for us to remember the United States. It first hit the United States when Donald Trump was president. Mm-hmm. And Trump made a big deal out of saying, we don't know what it is. It's a virus. Don't panic. Right? It was don't panic, don't panic, don't panic, as liberal media and the opposite viewpoint to the Republican Party was panicking, counting. Once you start counting sick people and counting beds and counting dead, it didn't serve us in Vietnam. It didn't serve us in Afghanistan or Iraq. Why would we think it's going to serve us during the coronavirus outbreak, right? So now everybody's worried about numbers without having any context for those numbers, without actually doing the deep research. If you remember how many bad medical journal articles came out, how much what was it? It was like the American Center for Disease Control. The CDC came out and said early on that there's no evidence that coronavirus can spread from human to human. Right? Do you remember that? They made a freaking meme out of it with like a little boy on his grandpa's shoulders or some garbage. They were so wrong. So in the middle of all this, then we have an election year and a change in president. And then once coronavirus was deemed not a superbug, then it became a political issue. Once it became a political issue, somebody had to run on a platform about coronavirus. Biden won. He had to do something about coronavirus because he had just won on that platform. So he pours money into vaccines and he forces vaccine among government employees. And we all know what happened from there. Essentially, the United States government got behind the idea that coronavirus was a major issue. Mm-hmm. And every other first world country followed our lead. There's no walking that back. You can't fund research for a vaccination on short notice. You can't create policy around a virus that you then later on say, my mistake, you guys. It really wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. We have a pretty solid plan to take care of the high-risk individuals. Maybe we shouldn't have put so much money into a race for a vaccine. Maybe we did some things wrong. The government can't say that. They can't admit their mistakes. But what they can do is try to push to focus us, the American public, on something else. That's why I think they were never held accountable. Because if the United States government was to say, China, your bad health practices made this happen, that just opens the door to China being like, well, your bad decision about these health practices made it into something that it wasn't, right? Did our labs potentially leak a virus? Yes.
Well, I mean,
our virus
if you rewind,
No.
if you do rewind, China had an overreaction. If we had an overreaction, then they definitely had an overreaction because they were welding apartment doors shut. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they were, arresting people, had people in mop suits. They were disinfecting factories. Mm-hmm. And so as severe as the response was here in the U.S., it was more severe there. So
the difference is
how could they claim that?
Nobody followed China. China did what China did. Nobody took action until we took action. Mm-hmm. After the United States started locking people up locking up businesses and forcing people to work from home and shutting down travel. After that, that's when you saw everybody else start to really apply the policies. I remember I was in the Middle East at the time. I was in the UAE at the time. things went crazy in China, and the UAE was undecided how it was going to respond. Lots of Chinese were coming to and from Dubai and to and from Abu Dhabi, but the Emirates didn't want to shut down all of their economy until they knew something was significant, right? Plus, they have a very small population and a really high level of medical technicians, so they didn't run into the risk, the oversaturation of hospitals like we had in the United States. But once the U.S. president made an issue out of it, then the Emiratis made an issue out of it. And that's how things kind of tumbled. So China, you're right, China overreacted by our standards, but they reacted in exactly the way you would expect a surveillance police state, to behave. Welding people into buildings and doing other inhumane things.
Yeah, and then, on top of that, one of your responses when I asked, why don't you think this was an act of war, is because they released on their own people. But we know they don't treat their people like we treat our people. They have slavery still. Your shoes are probably made from it. Our phones are made from, everything's made from it, and they have an overpopulation problem. So I don't think it would be out of the realm to say maybe this was some type of a population control thing for China, or maybe they did release it, upon the world to create everything that happened.
I mean, you're, again, considering that everything is a possibility, it becomes a question of probability. Mm-hmm. In my estimate of China, they don't often make moves that have more loss than benefit. And they've lost significantly since COVID came out. We all got smart to their role in supply chain management or supply chain control. We all got smart to their lack of human rights, their control of movement. I mean, those are human rights abuses, right? They could have done that for decades, both of those for decades, without us ever even noticing it.
Yeah.
Coronavirus, it pulled the veil back. Not to mention the fact that then after the United States laid off of COVID policy and Europe started pulling back COVID policy, the Chinese continued a very strict zero tolerance policy. Why would they do that, right? Is there the potential that they were trying to essentially kill off their older generation and kill off their weaker, sicker generation because we know it targets immunocompromised individuals? Of course, there's a possibility, but probability-wise, they lost much more coming out of COVID than they gained. That doesn't strike me as a calculated, intentional move.
Okay. I mean, it's just, it's hard for me to believe it wasn't when all these other things, lead to their end game, their goal.
So I don't think that, I think you're dead on about their end game. I think you're dead on about all of the multifaceted things that China's doing, for sure. The only place where I'm divergent is in thinking that COVID was intentional. For all we know, it was a biological weapon that they were planning to release when they executed their endgame. Perhaps that's true. We don't know. All I'm saying is that I am feeling like the higher probability reason that I am saying that it is low probability that they intentionally released it in 2019 in Wuhan among their own people for some strategic benefit. I feel like that was a mistake. Either a mistake that happened naturally or a mistake that was fabricated in the lab. It was still a mistake. That's all I'm saying, because all this stuff is legit.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Sean Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.
So you get up at 4 a.m. and you get on this biomat. Mm-hmm. And the biomat resets your frequencies.
See, if you wake up in anxieties, dude, if you don't do anything about it, it drags on all day, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And what happens when you have anxieties? It attacks the nervous system. It puts you in a state of survival. We're trained how to find, fix, and kill the enemy abroad, but what happened to the enemy is you. You ever woke up and instantly you had anxieties?
All the time.
Yeah. Me too at one point. So that's the nervous system getting taxed. Okay. And what you got to do is you got to really focus on your nervous system, not your thoughts, your nervous system. Okay. So that's your nervous system, the anxieties. So initially, what I do in the mornings, I want to ground myself. So meditation. Meditation is so important because you're dropping that brainwave to slow brain waves, but you're conscious. And when you're able to do that, you're able to kind of reprogram the subconscious. You're able to influence that. And that's the program. That's 95% of how your day goes through the subconscious, your program. So that's what I focus on first, mind.
So you get up at 4 a.m. and you get on this biomat, and the biomat resets your frequencies.
I have to breathe into it. So basically, there is a breathing practice that you have to do. Meditation is a breathing practice. For me, my breathing practice is I go off an old Hindu breathing practice. I have many breathing practices. But in the morning, what I want to do is I want to go into deep inhales and long exhales. Right, and that's the Hindu. But what the Hindu is, they roll their belly. It's almost, they roll their belly on the way out. So when you roll your belly to spine, what you're doing is you're activating the lower abdominal. We breathe very shallow in our day. In our upper lungs, we don't breathe, right? And majority of our energy is stored within the solar plexus area. If you just meditate, breathe into it, you'll feel, oh man, I feel something here. Well, that's the anxieties, and that's the nervous system, right? So you have to be able to breathe into it. So if I do that every single morning, what am I doing, Sean?
Creating a habit
I'm reprogramming.
every morning.
Reprogramming every morning, my mind.
How long does this take you?
You know, I started off, you know, I've tried to be an overachiever sometimes. I start off 30 minutes. And I couldn't get thoughts out. It got louder for me. But I would sit there every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, man. And I sat there for 3 years, failing every day. Thoughts. I would come out. But then I think about it. It's like, how much stuff have we seen on the teams? Like how, you know, like my background in war, like how much stuff have I seen? Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts there. So I let it, man. I just let it run, you know. And there was a certain point where my meditation practice caught up, the skill. And I'm able to let go of thought and breathe into emotion. That's how you actually move energy. So in the morning when I ground myself out, if I feel anxieties, that's gone by the time my day hits. See, if you wake up in anxieties, dude, if you don't do anything about it, it drags on all day, doesn't it? And what happens when you have anxieties? It attacks the nervous system. It puts you in a state of survival. You're not present.
You know, we talked about this yesterday, I believe, and about meditation and some of the, you know, I was doing great. It's pretty much completely fallen off. And you know, when I felt like I was getting good at it, it was somebody had, at one point along the line had told me thoughts are like clouds. They just pass through. And I could get to the point where all of my thoughts would pass through. And then I would go into this, I guess it would be a meditative state, and I wouldn't know how long I would be there. And until I came back to, and once I realized, it's kind of like a realization for me, like, oh shit, I have no more, like, all the thoughts are gone. That to me was kind of like the signal, like, all right, you're done for today's meditation is wrapped up. You can move about your day. And then it kind of fell off, and I tried to get back into it. And you know, I don't wake up with anxieties every morning, but you know, there's especially being a business owner, you know, it's things come up, you know what I mean, a lot. And as I'm sure you can relate, and being a public figure, things come up a lot of hate comes towards me, also a lot of love, but you know, as humans, we gravitate towards the hate. It's just how we're programmed, right? And so I'll get there, and a lot of times I wind up in this wheel, you know, where I cannot. it's somebody's coming at me or whatever it is. And I wind up in this wheel, and I feel like by sitting there not doing anything, it makes it worse. Does that make sense? And so I get frustrated. I leave my meditation and I just go about my day, because it gets that off my mind rather than sitting. Can you relate to that at all?
Okay, so deeper than that. Thoughts, feel, emotion. So let's just say you wake up with anxieties. That's an energy. And an energy wants to stay alive. It needs to stay alive. And how do you feel energy? Through thoughts. So let's say you feel anxieties, you wake up and you're like, oh man, I got this meeting today. I got to talk to this guy. Oh God, I got to take my kid here. You know, you have a lot of daddy duties, right? You have a lot of like life duties. So that attaches on to the emotion. If I was to tell you, let go of thought and focus on feel. We have three minds. We have thoughts. We have a heart, and we have our gut. The gut and the heart can be trusted. The mind can't be. So when you're hearing thoughts, let it go and focus in on feel. When I wake up and I have anxieties, right away, I could feel it, right? And I still have it sometimes today. But when I wake up and I feel it, I thank it because I can release it now. And literally it takes me 30 seconds.
Wow. 30 seconds.
30 seconds to transmute that energy. You can't kill energy. You can't just eliminate energy. Energy's forever. Our soul energy, right? It's forever. But what you can do is transmute energy.
Transmute.
Okay, so let's go back, right? Go back in time where you had a bad relationship, right? And she broke your heart. Fast forward that a year later, you don't care. You don't even care. Time heals things. So you transmute it through time. But what if I tell you can transmute it faster than that? Instead of suffering for a year, you can transmute it within, I don't know, minutes. So transmuting energy is that. You got to feel energy. So energy wants to be felt. You know, look, everything I'm telling you, Sean, it took me literally 9.5 years to figure it out. And the Green Berets, you know, we're really good at intelligence and understanding the situation. And what happened if the situation, the enemy's you? You know, we're trained how to find, fix, and kill the enemy abroad, but what happened to the enemy's you? So you got to find the patterns. So the patterns are anxieties in the morning. Okay, the patterns was thoughts that controlled me throughout my day, and thoughts are tied to emotion. The more thoughts I have, the more emotions I'm going to feel. So if I can let go of thought and let that emotion pass like the clouds, then it doesn't affect you. You know, I religion-wise, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus, but I also believe that there were great that walked this planet that taught us about God and healing and stuff like that. And Buddha is one. And Buddha taught us about letting go. But what if I tell you, I don't know how to let go? It took me 9.5 years to understand it.
Interesting. Well, what else do you have in your morning routine? No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.
One night, they had an object on radar. I'm going to use his language. Little men that look like the color of a Sicilian, kind of brown, but 39 inches tall. They are kind of materialized around them and then dematerialized off using this technology, this very advanced transdimensional physics.
In the documentary, you talk about some of the UFO technology. The metal is so pure it cannot be replicated. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we think, if you're driving a car or flying on a Boeing 737 or whatever, we dig that stuff up, aluminum and metal. We smelt it, refine it, roll it, put it together, rivets, welding, etc. An extraterrestrial vehicle and all its components are not made that way. They are made by creating a sort of an ultrasonic, very high-tech wave that pulls, let's call it the substrate, the elementals that are subatomic, together on, if you can visualize this, like almost like a blueprint in energy, and it materializes it. So it's seamless. Even the parts that are in it, anything that's energy or electronic related, is on a nanomolecular level entwined in it. But this is why it's very hard to study this stuff. I mean, it's not like taking apart a Soviet MiG or something. I know the men who worked on these projects, and I mean, you're dealing with really extraordinary, elegant, beautiful material sciences and matter. And that's why the materials are so pure, because they're not dug up and refined. They're actually assembled from this baseline energy matter interface in space-time. And make it real for you. There was a captain on a Navy contract vessel back in '62 or '63, and before he died, he contacted me. Great guy. And he had been, they were testing the Atlas rockets for intercontinental ballistic, but these didn't have nukes on them. They were testing the rocket and guidance systems way back. And they had a lot of UFO sightings because the ETs were watching how we were developing and kind of this breakout speed with thermonuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic, Cold War. And one night, they had an object on radar. It was triangulated. They had it on ship radar. So the captain has this guy say, hey, look, we have this boogie. And then it got confirmed from the command center. And they said, because they were able to do that, unfortunately, they triangulated it, and it was hit with some kind of weapon. This was '63. And it dropped, boom, like a rock right into the South Atlantic Ocean. So he was vectored over to the estimated point of impact and was there to retrieve it. And I have his whole story. And he never wanted to come forward because even when he had to have surgery once, they had an intelligence guy in there when he was under anesthesia. Be sure he didn't talk about this. But I have his whole information. So what happened is that when he got to the site, there was about a 6x6 pod, and they pulled it up on the ship. And it wasn't the whole craft. The whole craft had gone down, but apparently there was some sort of one molded thing. And there were four, I'm going to use his language, little men that look like the color of a Sicilian, kind of brown, but 39 inches tall, no hair, and also no external ears, no pinna, flaps, very fine featured. But the reason he contacted me, and this is why this is so funny, I've debriefed over 1,000 men like this. He said, I can't figure out how they got in and out of their uniforms. So they had a one-piece uniform. Now, no zipper and no buttons and no visible way they could get them out of this thing. And he says, how do they put them on? I said, well, they don't need a zipper or a button because they are kind of materialized around them and then dematerialized off using this technology, this very advanced transdimensional physics. And he went, oh my God, I would have never done it. I said, no, I mean, it's how they're doing it. So this is why people who encounter an actual ET craft or the EBINs, extraterrestrial biological entities, and they see even their clothing, none of it tracks because it's so far advanced.
Well, there was another, maybe, I can't remember if it was one or two of the whistleblowers that spoke about this. They spoke about, or maybe it was you talking about it, but when they got into the craft, the inside of the craft seemed almost infinite.
Yep. Yep, that was one of my. I was representing a whistleblower who is not ready to be unmasked yet. He still doesn't want to be known publicly. But yes, because you have a dimensional space shift as well. So an object that looks 30 feet across, you go in, and it was so big, you could, if you'd thrown a football, you couldn't have hit the other side of it. So, you know, again, all of this gets into an understanding of physics that, unfortunately, you know, we're not teaching our kids the real physics, the science of anything. I mean, we're all locked 100 years. This is the other part of the lost century I talk about, is that it has to do with medical technologies. I mean, as a doctor, I've seen some things that, oh my God, if we had that, the lives that could be saved. Spinal cord regeneration of lost limbs.
You've seen this stuff.
Yeah. At an underground lab on the Mexican-Texas border. Yeah. Sad. Yeah.
How are you getting access to this?
The people who like what I'm trying to do, that are in the system, take me. And I went to one place, a very funny story, and they had, they had the Marines there. You know, there was all these checkpoints, and the guy said, finally we got to the last one, and this was a facility, I won't say where it was, but I mean basically World War III, for all submarines to be run out of there. And my escort, my military advisor, finally we got to this last point where you go into the inner, it's this huge place, deep, and the guy goes, and what is Dr. Greer here for? And he says, you don't have a need to know. So he played the same need to know thing. So I went in. So I'd be on full disclosure. I've never worked for the government or a contractor. I have no clearances. I don't want a clearance. But there are people who know that what we're doing, we're fighting the good fight. And the people in the system, a lot of them are very good people. This is what a lot of people need to understand. They got trapped in a system where you get read into more and more of these compartments. Next thing you know, you're in something. And the guys, as I say this, I want to make a call for more whistleblowers watching to come out. There are guys out there watching your show, Delta Force, Navy SEAL, people in aerospace industry, various military commands that have dealt with or seen this, and they need to come forward because now there's a safe pathway for them to do it. And if you're corporate, now there's a 6-month clock on you. And we let me be very clear. We know who you are and where your assets are. And after those 6 months, you're subject to criminal prosecution, and you'll be lucky if that's all you're subject to. So this is getting very serious right now. That's why I'm on your show.
There's a 6-month window.
Yep.
When does that expire?
From the date this bill is finally signed. I mean, it's out of committee, it's going to be voted, and then it's an amendment to the intelligence bill.
Okay, so it's not actually, we're not wrapped up with that
No,
yet.
it's done. It's pretty much, it's done.
But it's not in effect yet.
I'll have to ask my guy who's shepherding it through.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Sean Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.
Little boy knew he was dying. Begged his father, please don't let me die. I want to see mom again.
19 people
Baked to death, died.
baked?
These smugglers would just hang panties up in a tree as a trophy.
9 years old?
This little girl's world was destroyed. She's never going to be the same. What a horrible, horrible death this child went through. Joe Biden's the first president in the history of this nation who came into office and unsecured a border on purpose. And right away, the thing that really, really affected me was two things. Number one, talking to a little girl about 9 years old that was part of a smuggling group who was raped multiple times by members of the criminal cartel.
9 years old?
Yeah. And let me tell you something, as tough as a guy you want to be, when you sit down, you get on your knees, you talk to this little girl, and everything innocent, pure, has been ripped from her, where you can tell that she has no faith in humanity. I mean, this little girl's world was destroyed. She's never going to be the same. I don't care how much counseling she gets, right? And I'm a father. And you think, how could someone do that to such an innocent little girl? And it really changes who you are. I mean, it's just like, I can't believe there's a human being out there that would do that to a little girl. The members of cartels are animals. They don't care about these people. These people are a commodity. And there's been several instances where, women and children that I've been involved with through investigations were sexually assaulted by the cartels as, demanded as part of crossing them, or either across the desert or over the river, or just take it, just rape them for the hell of it. I mean, I've seen rape trees, where these smugglers would just hang panties up in a tree as a trophy. And the 9-year-old girl shook me, because then you realize just how inhumane these people are. The thing that probably shaped me the most was back in, I think it's 2003. I was in Dallas, Texas, giving a speech to the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We just became ICE less than a year earlier. They took customs and immigration, made ICE. So I was there to explain this new agency and how we can work together and collaborate. I remember getting an emergency phone call from Washington, D.C. John Morton, who was the director at the time, but was actually his deputy, was adultery, called me and says, "Hey, you're in Dallas. You need to get down to Victoria, Texas right away. There's a tragedy down there, and we want you to go down there and take over the investigation." Because they knew, at the time I was assigned to headquarters, they knew I spent most of my career, as I said, in alien smuggling and trafficking cases. So they flew me down there in an Air Marine plane, and I landed down at the crime scene. When I got there, the sheriff, and I think it was a Texas Ranger, walked me through the crime scene. Okay, I said, "Okay, it's yours." So I remember walking up to there's a tractor trailer, and there's 19 people baked to death in back that tractor trailer.
19 people
Baked to death, died.
baked?
Baked, heat, it's just, they're in a steel box, tractor trailer, steel box, black, no air, in the middle of summer. And so I get up to the crime scene, and I walk up to the crime scene right away. There's just the trailers there. The truck's gone. He unhooked it and he left, the driver. So I walk up to the crime scene, and all I have is a suit. I'm wearing a suit because I was giving a speech. I left. I didn't get back to the hotel and get my stuff. I went straight to the scene. So I get there, and I walk up to this tractor trailer. Right away, I see several bodies on the ground, because when those doors finally opened up, the people were such a rush to get air that they knocked some dead bodies out of the truck onto the ground. So I noticed some dead bodies on the ground there. Then I got to the back of the tractor trailer, and I looked in the back of the tractor trailer. I just see dead people. Most of them in their underwear, because they were trying to get some relief from the searing heat. And right away, so I looked at, I keyed on a little boy. And he was partially covered up by who later found out was his father, who was protecting him. And I keyed in on him. And he was wearing the same color underwear that my little boy had. Same underwear. And I had a 5-year-old son at the time. So right away I keyed in on him. So we had, so I took over the investigation. U.S. Attorney of Houston flew in, and a helicopter and came to the crime scene. But when I was processing the crime scene, we had a guy taking pictures, and I was telling him to take all these pictres, what I needed. But I told him that we would do the boy last, and mainly because I couldn't handle it at the time. So we processed the crime scene, and I testified to this. And I got angry one testimony where someone claimed I didn't care about dying children. He should have worn my shoes. I've seen a lot of dying children, dead children in my career. So When we got to the child, I knelt down beside him. I put my hand on him, and I said a prayer, because I knew, based on the years I've done alien smuggling investigations, what a horrible, horrible death this child went through. He baked to death. And after we crime scene photos, we, of course, the investigation, where I'm there on the ground. They had to fly clothes in. Again, I came up with clothes on my back. But through the investigation, we found out the little boy was the first one to die. And the witnesses there that survived said that little boy begged his father not to let him die. The little boy knew he was dying. Begged his father, please don't let me die. I want to see mom again. I want to see my mommy. And when you hear the testimony from the surviving witnesses, it just tore you up. How this child, no 5-year-old should have to beg for his life. No 5-year-old should be baking to death in a black box. That got up to 175 degrees, they said. And he was the first one to die, and his father died on top of him, because some of the witnesses were saying that some of the members of the group back there talked about tearing the boy apart and putting him out through there's brake lights. They busted out, trying to get some air. And there's some talk about maybe we put parts of the boy out there to draw attention to our problem. That never got fully vetted, because some witnesses said it didn't happen. But his father did die on top of his child, and it just hovering him. And you think about it, I just don't think about it.
Rip this boy apart.
That was
body part.
Testimony from a couple of them people. Now, a couple people said that wasn't true, but there's a reason. The father was over the top of him, like this. We asked why. Anyway, Jal was the first one to die. Then so many people were starting to die, and there's so many people in back of the tractor trailer, they're dying standing up and trying to find a place to fall. And like I said, when we got the crime scene, most of them in underwear, trying to get some relief from the heat. So through that investigation, the first couple of weeks, I'm listening to this testimony, and I just don't think about, okay, the child died. I'm thinking about how he died, what his last 2 hours was like, what was his last hour like. His father couldn't help him. His father put him in that position, begging his father to help him. His father can't. They're in a steel box, locked in a steel box. No air in there. The air compressor was turned off. And the information was it was turned off because he wanted to draw attention to the truck. Because if the truck's empty, going through a checkpoint, if the air conditioning on, that means you got something back there. So there's a lot of testimony from a lot of different witnesses saying a lot of different things. But the way that child died, and I didn't sleep for a week down there. I'm a pretty tough guy, but that affected me. Because I had a 5-year-old son at the time, and you started thinking about, why is my son lucky and that child wasn't? Why is my son born in the greatest nation on earth and this child wasn't? And so, and I've been honest about that. After we put all 14 of those people in jail, anybody involved, they're in prison. And we shut that investigation down pretty quick, put a lot of people in prison. And after the investigation was done, I had to go get help. I couldn't sleep. Just the image of this little boy, how he suffered. And I had a son the same age. That affected me more than anything. Because I realized that didn't have to happen. If we had a secure border, that little child wouldn't have died. And that's why for the last 4 years, that's one of the reasons I wake up every pissed off, because I knew when they open this border up, more kids are going to die, more women and children will get sexually assaulted, more Americans are going to die from fentanyl and other drugs coming across that border. Sex trafficking is going to increase tenfold. So I woke up every day for 4 years on Biden, pissed off, and I actually did. I woke up just mad that Joe Biden's the first president in the history of this nation who came into office and unsecured a border on purpose. There wasn't mismanagement. There wasn't incompetence. He knew exactly what he was doing. I wrote an op-ed, FoxNews.com, about 6 months before the election. I said, if Joe Biden becomes president, we lose the border.
No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, Share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts. Who do you trust to control your fucking mind?
Once you get towards Neuralink into people's brains, there's an element here where it'll turn us superhuman. The flip side of that is
They can manipulate every one of your senses: touch, smell, taste, insert emotions, fear.
I don't think any country is prepared to govern technology as powerful that we're going to be developing. These are so much more powerful than anything that has come before, 1,000 times bigger and more important.
Something that Huberman brought up is that I was like, well, if is going to help the blind see, then could they project a total false reality into your head? Meaning you're seeing who knows what, shit in the skies everywhere. Sounds like they could recreate an entire false reality. He said, yes, they will have that ability, but not only will they have that ability, they can manipulate every one of your senses: touch, smell, taste, insert emotions into your brain, fear, whatever it is. And I was like, holy shit, like they could manipulate your entire reality into a false reality. I mean, you think that's... And then I asked Dr. Ben Carson about it, and he said, who's a world-renowned neurosurgeon, he said, yes, absolutely. He goes, or, they could use it for good. But he goes, which he kind of put it on me. He's like, well, what do you think would happen? And like, would it be used for good eventually, or would it be used for evil? And I mean, what are your thoughts on that? You think that's a real possibility?
I mean, yeah. So first of all, like, we don't understand the brain too much today, but eventually we will. Like, science is going to solve this problem, right? And everything you just mentioned is ultimately going to be on the table. Manipulating your emotions, manipulating your senses. The senses thing is already happening, where I think in monkeys, they've shown that they can, they don't know what it's like from the monkey's perspective, but they're able to project on a grid of a monkey and get them to click on the right button really reliably.
Wow.
So they somehow hook into basically the neural circuits that are doing the visual image processing in the brain, and they're able to project things into their vision, such that the monkey will always click the button that you want it to click, and then you give it a treat or something.
Damn.
And so manipulating vision, manipulating your senses, manipulating your emotions. This will be longer term, but leveraging your memories. Manipulating your memories, manipulating that stuff is on the table. The other stuff that is, I think, more exciting is being able to hook into AI, and all of a sudden I have encyclopedic knowledge about everything, and just ChatGPT or other AI systems do, I can think at superhuman speeds. I can all of a sudden I can I have way more information I can process. I can understand everything that's going on in the world and then process that instantaneously. I think there's an element here where it'll legitimately turn us superhuman from a just cognitive standpoint. But then to your point, the flip side of that is the risk the other way, which is that you're going to have it's a huge attack vector.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not super tech, but your company, Scale AI, you basically, correct me if I'm wrong, Scale AI is basically the database that the AI uses to come up with its answers and answer your prompts and all of that, correct?
Yeah, so we do a few things. So we help large companies and governments deploy safe and secure advanced AI systems. Mm-hmm. We help with basically every step of the process, but the first thing that we were known for, and we've done very well, is exactly what you're saying, which is creating large-scale data sets and creating data foundry is what we call it, but creating the large-scale data production that goes into fueling every single one of the major AI models. And if you ask questions in ChatGPT, that question, it's able to answer a lot of those questions well because of data that we're able to provide it. And as AI gets more and more advanced, we're continually fueling more advanced scientific, advanced information and data into those models. And then we also work with, the largest, enterprises and governments like the DoD and other agencies in the US to deploy and build full AI systems, leveraging their own data. And our strategy as a company has been, how do we focus on a small number of customers where we can have like a really big impact. So we work with the number one bank, we work with the number one pharma company, the number one healthcare system, the number one telco, the number one country, America, and we work with all of them to like, how can you, no kidding, take how you are operating today and take sort of the workflows that you're doing today or the operations that you have today and use AI to fundamentally transform them. So if you're like the largest healthcare system in the world, you have to, provide care to all of these patients, millions of patients, how do you do so in the most effective manner? How do you do it logistically better? How do you improve your diagnoses? How do you improve the overall health outcomes of all of your patients? Like that's a problem that we help solve with them. Or for the DoD, there's so much that we can do to operate more efficiently and ultimately in a more automated way. I mean, you'll know this, I think, better than anyone. And so how do you start implementing those systems with AI?
We'll dive way more in the weeds on that later in the interview.
Yeah.
Kind of where I was going with this was, if originally it was feeding the AI, you're given the data center, you're given the data to the AI to come up with the answers and answer the prompts. And so where I was going is, if you have Neuralink in your head and it's accessing your data centers, how easy would it be to just feed bullshit into the data center that then feeds everybody that has a Neuralink in their head? So it could be, it could be anything. Here's an example. I'm a Christian. A lot of people think that AI is going to manipulate the Bible and change a lot of things. And so how easy would it be to just feed that into the AI data center? And then that's the new, whatever you feed it, that becomes the new truth, because that's what everybody's accessing, is that specific data.
Yeah, I think, yes, for sure, that's a huge risk. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's really important that US or other democratic countries lead on AI versus the CCP, like the Chinese Communist Party, or Russia or other autocratic countries, because the potential to utilize even AI today, by the way, you can use it to propagandize to a dramatic degree. But yeah, once you get towards, you have Neuralink or other brain-computer interfaces that can directly, insert thoughts into people's brains. It's extreme power that has never existed before. And so who governs that power? Who governs that technology? Who makes sure that, it's used for the right purposes? Those are like some of the most important societal questions that we'll have to deal with.
Man, where do you even start with that? Who do you trust to control your fucking mind?
Yeah, I think, well, it's interesting. I think the one thing that I think has been, I think a lot of people kind of understand it now, and we were talking a little bit about this at breakfast, is like, even the degree to which even just general media today kind of controls your mind or controls the like opinions you have or the beliefs you have. And, we were talking about like, does the media prop up certain military forces to make them seem far more fearsome than they actually are? And like, there's like some low grade, you can kind of view like some low grade forms of like,
Propaganda,
manipulation, all that stuff is like happening, like, let's say like on a scale of 1 to 10 at the 1 or 2 level today. And then once you have Neuralink or other devices, it's going to be like a 9 or a 10. And I think it's really hard. I don't think any country is prepared to govern technology as powerful as the technology that we're going to be developing over the next few decades.
Yeah.
Like AI, I don't know if we're prepared. Brain-computer interfaces, I don't know if we're prepared. Large-scale robotics, I don't know if we're prepared. Like these are technologies that are just so much more powerful than anything that has come before. Sometimes people will say like, you know, AI is the new mobile. You know, it'll be as big as mobile phones. And it's just, no, it's going to be like 1,000 times bigger and more important and like more impactful. And it's not clear that we did the best job regulating mobile phones even. So it's going to be really important that we get it right.
No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.
I can't use the truth as a cudgel. That's a lie. Like then the truth it's not the truth. It's truth as weapon. Really what I'm doing is beating her with the truth. If you lie habitually about something, that's the world you come to inhabit. You know, and if you do that with enough heart, let's say, you can live in a delusion, and then your perception of the world doesn't match the world. That's like having a map of the wrong territory. Mm-hmm. That's a really good way to get lost, like seriously lost. And then you get lost like that, you get bitter, and then you get resentful, and then all the real hell starts to break out. So it's a very bad idea.
It is. I see people do it all the time on social media. They they lie about their background. They lie about what they own. They lie about past experiences. They lie about what happened in war, and they build this character. Mm-hmm. And I see it time and time again with I would say more than not the social media phenomenons, right?
And you think social media facilitates that?
I think it maybe, but where I'm going with this is then I see them get trapped. This has happened to friends of mine that build a character around themselves rather than just be themselves, and they get trapped in that character. Mm-hmm. And exactly what you were talking about, they get resentful and angry at the world and just having to put that false cloak on every day when you wake up. They go out into the world and it's a completely false person. Mm-hmm. And it follows them for years.
And the resentment, that's a very good aspect of that.
Where I'm going with this is one particular part of your tour that I went to, We Who Struggle with God. You were talking about pride. Mm-hmm. And where I'm going with this is they live this lie and they think that they're trapped, but they're only trapped because their ego won't allow them to come out and tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And they just dig themselves in deeper and deeper.
In the story of Exodus, the Egyptians are freed from the tyranny or the Israelites are freed from the tyranny of Egypt. But that tyranny has two elements, because the Pharaoh is a tyrant, but the Israelites are slaves. Like a tyrant needs a slave. So they're both morally culpable. The tyrant's culpable because he's a tyrant, and the slaves are culpable because they're slaves. It's a dance. So Moses comes along. He's speaking on behalf of God, and he opposes the tyrants, and then he frees the slaves, frees them. They cross the Red Sea, which is a bit of a catastrophe. But they end up not in the promised land. They end up in the desert. And the reason for that is that when you abandon your tyranny, you end up in the desert. That's why people stick pridefully. One of the reasons people stick pridefully to their erroneous presumptions. It's like once you've built that false character, you let it go. It's not like it's all good then. It's like, no, you're lost. And the Israelites, they're lost for 3 generations, right? So you may be so lost that you just can't get it back together in your lifetime, especially if you stick even more bitterly, let's say, to your pride. Because it's a real mystery. Imagine this. There's a pathway to enlightenment. Just imagine that might be the case. Of course, sages have said that forever. And you might say, well, why the hell wouldn't people just walk it then? if there's a pathway to enlightenment, that seems like a good deal. It's like, well, there's a lot of desert to wander through when you let go of your stupidity. And so people don't. They double down, which is what the Pharaoh does in the Exodus story, right? And he doubles down 10 times until he destroys the future and his own people. That happens all the time. People do that all the time in their lives. States do it. Nations do it.
I think it's sad. I have friends that do this, and I think I'm sad for them that they put on that false cloak every day, and it carries on for years and years and years. And I see them. I see how exhausted they are. I mean, and that is, with.
It's very difficult to maintain a structure built on lies. Eh?
You lose track of them all.
Well, that's for sure. No kidding. No kidding. This is why in a marriage, it's just so much better just to say what you think. And, I mean, telling the truth is complicated. You can't use the truth as a weapon. Like, if you're telling the truth, it's a multi-dimensional problem. Like if I'm talking to my wife, I have to talk to her in a way, I can't use the truth as a cudgel. That's a lie. Like then the truth it's not the truth, it's truth as weapon. Really what I'm doing is beating her with the truth. I'm looking for a club, not the truth.
Could you give me an example of that?
Well, maybe you're trying to sort something out, even about how things are working on the domestic front. Who does what job? And maybe she's doing something that isn't up to scratch, let's say, with regard to the house. Well, you could try to address that as a problem to be solved, or you could use it as an opportunity to punish and trumpet your moral superiority. And you could say, well, I'm just telling the truth. It's like, yeah, well, you're not doing a very good job of it, because the truth would be, well, I need to tell you what I think, but I have to be around you tomorrow and next week, so I should try to tell you what I think in a way that isn't going to turn you against me. I guess there's something in that's something like minimal necessary force with regard to the truth. The truth has to serve the harmony of the relationship, as well as describing whatever the problem is that has to be solved. So I would say the same with children. If you're disciplining them, you want to do that in the spirit of love. And what does that mean? Well, the reason you're disciplining them isn't to lord it over them or to indicate your moral superiority, but to put a wall up to protect them, let's say, or to specify a pathway forward that they can walk down that would be productive. And if you're not doing that, well, then you're not serving the truth in the highest sense. And so that's why there's a religious insistence that truth has to serve love, that the two things are united. And love means care, I suppose. People often think that means the provision of security and safety, but love means encouragement too, right? In some ways, that's the distinction between the female role and the male role in a family, or feminine and masculine. The feminine tends to provide security and safety, and the masculine tends to encourage and challenge. And both those are aspects of love. And that's also the case within a relationship. I mean, you want to provide your wife and her to you a certain degree of security, but you want that allied with an optimal challenge because that facilitates development. And that's one of the things that lends life interest and adventure. So,
for somebody that is living a lie, how would you advise them to get back to baseline?
Well, I have a program online that's actually designed to deal with that problem. We put together, my colleagues and I, Daniel Higgins and Robert Peel. Robert Peel was my graduate supervisor at McGill, and Daniel was a student of mine at Harvard, and I've worked with these two for about 40 years now. We put together a series of writing exercises at a site called selfauthoring.com, and the past authoring program helps you write an autobiography, right? Break your life into 7 epochs, identify the events of emotional significance during those times, positive and negative. Tell the story of your life. Write it down as honestly as you possibly can. That's a good way of figuring out where you are. The next program in that series helps you identify your faults and your virtues in the present. So everybody has a temperament, and your temperament is going to provide you with opportunities. Like if you're extroverted, for example, you're going to be someone, you be tilted in a sales direction, so that's a benefit that comes along with that temperament. Extroverts can be narcissists as well. And so that would be the sin that would be associated with that temperament. And wherever you are in the temperamental landscape, you're going to have some advantages conferred on you by those temperaments and some disadvantages, and it's useful to sort those out. So it's easy for creative people, for example, to be scattered. It's easy for people who are high in intelligence to be prideful, right? So probably the biggest individual difference between people is intelligence. And you might think in some ways that that's unfair. Some people are born with an IQ of 130 and some with an IQ of, say, 70, and those are very different people. The person with an IQ of 70 is going to struggle to become literate, regardless of the amount of time they put into it, right? But the temptation that goes along with intelligence is to be prideful, right? To assume that you should be worshipped because of your intelligence, or things should go your way just because you're smart, that the world should bow down at your feet, that the fact that you win arguments means that you're right. Well, anyways, the present authoring program helps people identify their faults and virtues. And then there's a future authoring program. That's the third step. You can do any of them or all of them, that helps you lay out a pathway to the future. And it's very structured. All those are very structured because it's hard to write an autobiography. It's hard to write a plan for the future. The future plan, we've done a lot of research on. If a young man does the future authoring program, when he goes to college, he's 50% less likely to drop out. 50% is a lot. Mm-hmm. And grade point average goes up about 35%. The future authoring program helps people develop a vision for their life. And you actually don't have any hope or any freedom from anxiety without a vision for your future. A vision for your future is the structure that provides you with hope and that regulates your negative emotion. Because it specifies a goal. Once a goal is specified, you feel positive emotion in relationship to the goal. And your anxiety is constrained because you have a direction. You're anxious when you have way too many directions. That's why you get anxious if your car breaks down. It's like, what do I do now? Too many pathways. You want the pathways through life collapsed to a single implementable dimension, one that goes uphill. And then when you walk uphill, so to speak, each step that you see yourself making is indexed by positive emotion, hope, enthusiasm, meaning. So you need a vision. This isn't optional. People are very bad at this. We're very bad in our culture at helping people develop a vision. We don't actually do it with kids in school. It's a blind spot that's so large that it's a kind of miracle. So the way this program works is that, so here's the game. Okay, so you're going to look 5 years out in your life. And you're going to treat yourself, for the purpose of this exercise, like somebody that you care for. That's a hard thing for people to do. Like, most people are reverse narcissists. Most people are harder on themselves than they are on other people. That isn't always the case. There are narcissistic people, but most people are harder on themselves than they are on other people. And they don't really believe that it would be just or good if they were successful and not miserable. Because they know their sins, they know the ways they've wandered off the path, they carry a lot of guilt with them, and so they don't really believe that they deserve anything good. That's a depressive temperament when it really gets out of control. So you have to put yourself in a position where you treat yourself like someone you care for. Okay, so get in that frame of mind. All right, now here's the deal. You can have what you want and need within the bounds of reason in 5 years, but you have to specify it. So if you could have what you wanted and needed that would satisfy you, what would that be? Well, that's a complicated question. People have a hard time answering that, right? But we break it down for them too. It's like, well, if you had the family you wanted, your siblings, your parents, your wife, your kids, what would that look like in some detail? Dream a bit. Like if you could have what you wanted, what would it look like? With your friends, same thing. You have the friends you want. People who are happy when good things happen to you and commiserate with you when bad things happen to you and that you can walk side by side with and that are on your side. People don't even understand that they can choose their friends, you know, and that they have a moral obligation to do so. What would your career look like? How would you educate yourself? How would you take care of yourself mentally and physically? What would you do with your time outside of work that would be productive and meaningful? How would you serve the community if you could have what you wanted? Well, this exercise helps people specify all that, and it's ridiculously useful. You need to orient yourself in the world. You need a vision. It's like the development of a map. It's a map of the future. And without that, you're lost. And people are lost and they blow in the wind. And then their lives are meaningless and they feel like they're powerless. And it's because they haven't developed a vision. The people perish without a vision. It's a very old idea.
No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts. This is your first real-world op, hostage rescue mission in Panama.
I was actually the first guy to go in. But he looked at me, I looked at him, he stuck his hand out. I mean, it was game time. Nothing needed to be said. Breacher on my team knocked the charge down, and it fell. And I was like, what is that? It was a C6 charge. It was P for plenty. It probably would have killed me. It got quiet. You could hear the prisoners screaming. From when we touched down to when we were ready to exfil with Kurt Muse was 6 minutes.
Wow. This is your first real-world op,
Yep.
hostage rescue mission in Panama. That's fucking crazy, man.
Well, and what's interesting, I'll never forget it. Guy I went through selection with. Went through selection with him, went through OTC, went to A Squadron with him, and now we're on the mission together. We're on the pods, you know, sitting on the bench seat on the pod. And he's right here. And he's going to be on the roof with a Mag 58. I actually go into prison. I'm one of the guys that go in. I was actually the first guy to go in through the prison door. And I'll get to that in a minute. But he looked at me, I looked at him, he stuck his hand out. I shook his hand. No words were said. Nothing needed to be said. Never forgot it. I mean, it was game time. Nothing needed to be said. I'll never forget it. And then we took off. We'd gotten word that in the major intersection, right going down to the commandancia and in the prisons over here, there was a machine gun set up. There was PDF. They had to be dealt with, or they were going to fire at the birds coming by. Well, we had a sniper team that came down. They came down off a hill overlooking the intersection. Guy had a bolt gun. Guy had a Mag 58. Guy had a three dudes. Guy had an M203. And the theory was they're in position. They're in Overwatch. And as soon as they see one of the PDF do this, they're going to light them up. And what I understood happened was the first two birds go over. I was in bird number 2. The first two birds go over. There was nobody in the intersection because I remember looking. I was on the right side. I remember looking for anybody. There was nobody there. We went over. They heard the birds. Then they come out. And then they're going to shoot at the second set of birds, bird 3 and 4. And they got lit up by the guys in the Overwatch position. Interestingly enough, never forget this, Christmas lights around the top of the prison. It's December 20th, 1989, right before Christmas. There's Christmas lights. I'll never forget it.
Wow.
And we were offset from the prison, and then the pilots did this number and then got in line, and the line landed right on top of the prison. and it peeled off. I got in position by the cupola. I had security position looking through the window down the stairs, the cupola on top. And then the second two set of birds came in. They dispersed. Breacher on my team went up to put a charge up. And in the process of pulling the time fuse, he knocked the charge down. And it fell right in front of me, about from me to you. And I was like, what is that? I didn't even, you know what I mean? It didn't even dawn on me it was the charge. Fortunately, when he went to pull it, he didn't ignite it. He did not ignite the time fuse. That probably would have killed me. If memory serves me correct, it was a C6 charge, which was P for plenty, brother. I mean, we were not going to take any chance of getting in that door. It was P for plenty. It probably would have killed me. Because I ended up going from being the guy looking through the window, now I'm going to be the number one guy, going through the door. And I was down on the knee, and I was like, what is that? I couldn't believe it. And I remember my team sergeant came up and goes, hey, man, get the backup charge ready, because I had a backup charge. And I go, why am I going to get the backup charge ready? Because the breacher's right there. Well, then the breacher went back around, and he said, hey, come on. He basically had me come up for cover. I covered him on the door. He put the charge back up. We initiated it, and dude, it was a boom. I'll never forget it. It was a boom. When I was looking in the cupola window, the lights were on. I thought the charge knocked out the lights, and it was because it was pitch black. What had actually happened, the snipers, the support guys had hit the generator and killed the lights. I didn't know that till later. They killed the lights in the prison, so it was pitch black. I come around, door's long gone on the cupola. I step in, there's no landing, Sean. Here's the door. The steps go right up to the door. There's no landing like this, where you step in and then go down the steps. It goes right up the door, like, out here, you guys got. There's none. So I almost, by the grace of God, I don't know how I didn't trip, because it's pitch black. I'm walking into it, and by the grace of God, somehow I didn't trip. Went down. The guys are following me, and people are like, well, why are you number one, man? I was the most expendable guy. It's that simple. No. I was the new guy on F team. F team and G team were going in. F team secured the route inside the prison, the stairwell, the hallway, that kind of stuff. G team was the ones that are going to extract him. They're going to be the team that gets him out.
So you basically set up a corridor.
Yeah, we did. Went down. Basically me, I can't remember who it was. Me and another guy held that first stairwell. G team fled, went past us. Now I go down to the next stairwell. There was actually a room that we were going to clear. Well, we didn't clear it because it was padlocked. We're like, okay, not really a threat. Chances are nobody's in there because it's padlocked from the outside. So we didn't clear it. And I was standing there on the stairs. And then about then, the C-130 starts lighting up the commandancia.
Shit.
Yeah. Yep. Spectre starts lighting up the commandancia. And it was loud. And I could see right out the window. I mean, right there, I'd look right there, and I could see the commandancia getting lit up by the Spectre. And because they had given us X amount of time, and I'm not sure how much time it was, but not long. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe not. Who knows? I don't even remember. It was not long at all to get in, get situated, and then they were going to start lighting up commandancia. So they started lighting it up. We're holding the stairwell. Somebody, a PDF guy, a guard, or whatever, poked his head around. Gary Harrell was there. He was the troop commander. He shot at him. I think he missed him. Pretty calm. He claimed later he thought he hit him, but I'm pretty sure he missed him. Because the guy took off. And then they came out with Muse. They put a C4 charge on his door and blew the door wide open. There was a guard that had told Kurt if there was a rescue attempt, he was going to kill him. Because Kurt, I think, asked him, hey, if there's a rescue attempt for me, what are you going to do? And he goes, I'll kill you. This guy was in the room right across from Kurt. So the priority was to get down to Kurt as soon as possible to beat this guy, before this guy gets his situational awareness, figures out what's going on, goes over to Kurt's cell and kills him.
You guys knew that before you went
Yep,
in?
we knew it.
Was he in the cell across?
Yeah, he was. He was in the room across. He was in the room across, and G-team went in and killed him. Yep. He was armed with a pistol. I think he was in a shower. If memory serves me correct, G-team found him in the shower. I think the guy went for his pistol, or already had a pistol in his hand, and they killed him. Yep. And they got Muse out. They brought in a little, aviator kit bag, and had body armor and a helmet. A body armor and a Kevlar helmet. Peeled him out. I remember seeing him go up the stairs. Couple things. We get up. We tell him, hey, PC secure, to get the extraction birds out. The reason the book's called 6 Minutes to Freedom, because from when we touched down to when we called, PC secure, called for exfil was 6 minutes. Just not that we were, it's just the way it worked out. Not like we had a set time standard or anything like that. It just happened. It was 6 minutes from when we sat down on top of the prison to when we were ready to exfil with Kurt Muse was 6 minutes.
Wow.
We were at the very top. You know what I mean? Stairwell. I remember I was here, Kurt Muse is here, and that door's here. Dude, I'll never forget this as long as I live. It got quiet for a minute. I don't know how long. Like the C-130 maybe was, taking a loop around, didn't have a, clear field of fire, whatever. Got quiet, and you could hear the prisoners screaming. And when you hear somebody screaming who, honest to God, thinks they're going to die, it's a sound you'll never forget. Now, I'll never forget it. It's nothing like you see in a movie or any of that other bullshit. These people were convinced they were going to die, and they're trapped in these prison cells. And I'll never forget that sound.
Damn.
Yep. So we go up, birds land. I was on bird 2. They get Muse on bird 1. They put him inside the bird. He's not on the pods. They put him inside the bird, and then they G-team, who rescued him, and then they're exfilling with him. I remember I got on the pod. I was like high-fiving. I didn't even bother to hook up. But the commo guy hooked me up, thank God. But I'm high-fiving. I go, we got him, yada, yada, yada. Well, the bird lifts up, and bird 1 kind of does this number over the prison wall and goes into the blackness. I mean, it's pitch dark. You can't see him. There was a cemetery right beside us. We lift up, we go over, and I see muzzle flash. Dude shooting at us. And I didn't get a beat on him, but I put some rounds down at him to get him, and then the muzzle flash stopped. And I'm pretty confident I did not hit the guy, but I at least got him to duck, so he's no longer shooting at our bird.
Yeah.
We lose track of bird 1. We go back to Howard Air Force Base. We land. I'm like, awesome. Bird 1 went down. Bird 1 with Kurt Muse went down. What happened was they were serious. They had 2 pilots. They had 6 dudes with Kurt Muse. They were seriously overloaded. And the pilot tried to gain speed and kick back up, but there was power lines. So he was worried about hitting the power lines. So he sets down on a road, a street, right on the other side of the cemetery. Well, 4 guys from G-team jump off and get out. And they're pulling security. The pilot waves them back, come on, because he's going to go down. He's essentially going down the street to gain, airspeed, and then he's going to lift off. When they get back on, 3 of the 4 guys don't hook back up. So that becomes critical here in a minute. Anyway, they go down. He takes a left on this street, and he starts to lift up, and the bird gets hit. Crashes. 1 guy, 3 of the guys all fell off. 1 guy was still, the team leader was still, he was hooked in, so he was good to go. And Muse, who's in the back, is good to go. And there was a guy from my team, my 2IC, assistant team leader, was basically with him, escorting him. He was fine too. Bird goes down, breaks the right strut off. The right strut had landed, one of the guys who fell off, had landed on his foot. He lost his big toe. I want to say on his right foot. He lost his big toe. And never, he stayed in the unit, but you can imagine when you lose a big toe, dude, you're never the same. Two of the other guys on the other side got shot. One guy got shot in the leg, one guy got shot at the very bottom of the body armor. They got hit. Bird goes down, tilts to the side. The pilots are doing their best to stop the rotors. There's a rotor still going. They both get out of there. They go, and they kind of hunker around the station wagon. If memory serves me correct, there was a station wagon they hunker around. Team leader hunkers them around, gets the wounded guys over there. Muse is there. My assistant team leader, who's, got clipped upside the head, whose bell is rung. They kind of hole up around this vehicle. Some Panamanians are coming out. Muse tells him in Spanish, he speaks magnificent Spanish, to get the fuck out of there.
No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.
How do I know this fact is true?
He says, I am Jesus, whom you're persecuting.
9 appearances of the risen Jesus in those 4 Gospels. So that's 7 ancient sources.
Paul was one of the Pharisees who had Jesus crucified.
Right. The evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ is so overwhelming. What I found fascinating in studying this as a skeptic is that when you study ancient history, and you're looking at some fact about the life of Alexander the Great, for instance, and you dig down, how do I know this fact is true? Most of the time, it's based on one source, maybe 2 sources of information. But for the conviction of the disciples that they encountered the resurrected Jesus, we have no fewer than 9 ancient sources, inside and outside the New Testament, confirming and corroborating the conviction of the disciples that they encountered the risen Jesus. I can tick them off real quick so you know what they are. The first is that creed I mentioned earlier, a creed whose historical credentials are so strong that one of the few Jewish New Testament scholars, Pinchas Lapid, said it may be taken as a statement of eyewitnesses. Second, we have Paul's testimony, because Paul said, I encountered the risen Christ, and then he got to know the disciples.
Which was just what people around the world are encountering today on the Damascus. And Paul was one of the Pharisees who had Jesus crucified.
Right. Exactly.
So he was the enemy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the Taliban now, coming over to our side kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
And it says on the Damascus Road, he's going to arrest and kill Christians. He was there when Stephen was martyred, given 2 thumbs up, because Stephen believed in Jesus as the Messiah. And he's like, that's wrong. We're getting rid of these people. When on the Damascus Road, this brilliant God of light appears to him. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. All over the world today. This is near-death experiences.
Yeah.
Who are you, Lord? He asked. And he says, I am Jesus, whom you're persecuting. And Jesus didn't tell him the gospel. He didn't tell him what to do. He said, you'll be told. And then later sends Ananias to explain to him. And Paul still had a choice, because he had a lot to lose.
Yeah.
Is he going to leave behind his power and his prestige and then suffer? Because he did.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's huge,
absolutely huge, and no incentive to do that. But what's also interesting is after he became the Apostle Paul, he became friends with many of the disciples, the other eyewitnesses. So he knew Peter, James, and John. Right. And he says in 1 Corinthians, in his letter he wrote, he said, whether it is I or they, this is what we preach. So he's saying, look, I encountered the risen Christ. So have they. So he's confirming that the disciples were eyewitnesses. He's another point of confirmation. The third area of evidence, corroboration, is the book of Acts. Even skeptical scholars will accept that the book of Acts is the account of the spread of the early church. And what is the thing that drove it? It was a proclamation of the resurrection. So here we have Peter in Acts chapter 2, who gets up before a crowd and he says, "Men of Israel, listen to these words. This Jesus, a man attested to you by miracles and wonders and signs, which he did in your midst. You know that he did." He's appealing to their common knowledge. And then he says, "This Jesus God raised from the dead, to which we're all witnesses." And how did they react? History tells us that 3,000 people said, "Peter, we know you're telling us the truth. What do we do?" They repented, and the church was born. So that's the first three sources. Then we have the next four sources, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which are historical biographies based on eyewitness accounts. There's, 9 appearances of the risen Jesus in those 4 Gospels. So that's 7 ancient sources. But then...
Plus you got Luke, who interviewed Mary.
Oh, yeah, there's other
many
sources,
others, yeah.
right. But we have sources from people who sat under the teachings of the eyewitnesses. So, for instance, if you still were teaching at your church in Austin, Sean, if you were to come to his church for 3 years, you'd have a pretty good idea what he believes, right? Yeah. Well, we have writings by people who sat under the teachings of the apostles themselves and can report what they said about the resurrection. So we have a letter that was written by Clement. Clement was, we believe, ordained by Peter himself. And Clement writes a letter in the 1st century to the church in Corinth, and he says that the disciples had complete confidence. Why? Why did they have so much confidence? Because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, because they were eyewitnesses to the risen Lord. And then Polycarp, who was appointed by John himself to be bishop at Smyrna, he writes a letter to the Philippian church, and he mentions the resurrection 5 times in that letter. And he said, talking about Paul and the other apostles, he said, "For they did not love the present age, but him who died for them and was raised by God on the 3rd day." So he's confirming the teachings of these eyewitnesses that they encountered the risen Christ. That's 9 very early eyewitness-based accounts of the corroboration of the eyewitnesses, the disciples who encountered personally the risen Jesus. That is an avalanche of historical data.
Can you tell he's a lawyer?
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. I just have a law degree.
Well, no, but here's the significance is what Lee's saying, and he was the legal editor for the Chicago Tribune, so not a slouch. But also Simon Greenleaf, who was a lawyer who wrote the Treatise of Legal Evidence, right?
He's the guy who made Harvard Law School what it is today, the 2nd best law school, because I went to Yale. So,
well, there you have it. I went to the University of Texas.
Good basketball team.
Okay. So Simon Greenleaf was always making fun of Christians and Christianity in his legal classes until some of his students came up and challenged him to take his treatise, his works on legal evidence, how to evaluate legal evidence, and put it against all the documents and evidence that Lee just said. He came to faith just like Lee.
I remember
when he looked at the evidence.
That's right.
Same with C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, when I was an atheist, I went and I'm doing this investigation into the resurrection. I remember going to the library, and of course, they didn't have Simon Greenleaf's book, which was written in the 1800s. And so I put an interlibrary loan, and it took about 6 months. And 6 months later, they give me this copy from the 1800s of this book by Simon Greenleaf, this great legal scholar who reports on the resurrection and so forth. And it was held together by rubber bands. But back then, we didn't have the internet. But, that's another great example is Sir Lionel Luckhoo, who is the greatest defense attorney in the world, according to the Guinness Book of World Records.
And more convictions of murder trials.
245 convictions in a row that he won acquittals 245 times in a row, either before the jury or on appeal. Knighted twice by Queen Elizabeth, became a member of the Supreme Court of his country, and he was a doubter about the resurrection. Same thing. He was challenged to investigate it. He did, and I'll recite to you one sentence he wrote that summarized his conclusion. He said, "I say unequivocally that the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ is so overwhelming that it compels acceptance by proof, which leaves absolutely no room for doubt." This from the greatest defense attorney who ever lived. Wow. And here's the funny thing. I told that story at Saddleback Church in Southern California, where Leslie and I had moved in the year 2000 to be a pastor there. And a woman came up to me afterwards and she said, "Hey, I'm your new neighbor. You're moving into my neighborhood. We haven't met yet." I said, "Oh, great to meet you." Said, "Yeah." Said, "I'm Sir Lionel Lucco's sister."
No way.
Who was his sister? And she not only confirmed the story, she showed me his private documents that he had done his research on.
Oh, how
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
But here's the point, and this is what got me into this. This is why I left my career in engineering. I was like, there's so much evidence. Why has no one told me this?
Yeah.
No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.
They basically carjacked a semi-truck. They stuffed them in the back of the trunk of the car. I popped the trunk and let the two Iraqis out.
Hey, guys.
And I thought, man, no wonder the bad guys think we are the greatest nation in the world.
Your next deployment to Iraq and all the vehicle interdiction stuff you're doing, let's go into some of that.
Yeah, so came back from the Q course. The next rotation over was a different one. So things had kind of evolved. We weren't doing 24-hour ops anymore. We were running day-night out of different outstations around the country. But a couple weeks into that rotation, we decided we were going to stand up a daylight vehicle interdiction cell. So we were going to use helicopters and intelligence collection to target individuals, and when they left structures or houses wherever they were and they were mobile, we could hit them in the right spot at the right time, minimizing external threat and civilians and everything else, and maximizing our ability to get exactly who we were after. So at this point in the war, intelligence collection was fantastic. Like, we had a lot of air assets, we had a lot of drones and things that were providing real-time information and visual stuff that we could see. So we would build target packets on folks. We would watch guys, we'd pattern a life them, and basically we were pre-staged at Balad. And when they got into a certain area where we felt like we could go get them, we'd load up on the helos and we'd go get them. My team was a completely new batch of folks at this point. So I was a 2IC roughly at the time. And basically we had a bunch of fresh guys out of OTC. Weird thing about the unit, it doesn't mean they were all young guys. Some guys don't end up over there till way late in their career. Some guys end up there early like I did, earlier in their career. So it was kind of a mixed bag, but they were new to the unit and had never been overseas with us. We were really good at what we were doing. So we were aggressively targeting foreign fighters, terrorists, and folks that were a part of the network. And we did so.
And these are key players.
Yeah, all of them.
It's not your everyday fucking ground fighter. It's not, we're gonna set an ID up and then go to a party. These are key players that you guys are going after.
Yeah,
and a lot of them.
A lot of them. Yeah, a lot of them. It led to a lot of very successful mission sets where you knew exactly who you were after. You were watching that individual. You watched them get into a vehicle. And then you flew up alongside them and confirmed that, hey, there's nobody but exactly who we think it is in that vehicle. They're all military age males. They're all our primary targets, and we're gonna deal with that threat. So very successful. We had some funny ones in there just to lighten it up after that like heavy last segment.
Yeah.
One time, I think it's my one and only hostage rescue, although a number of them have been done over the years by the Navy guys and by us. One in particular during this daylight vehicle interdiction phase is we were watching a couple of bad guys and they had left the structure they were in and they hadn't quite broken the box of where we needed them to be to launch yet. But while they were en route to that location, they stopped off at a gas station. We watched, it was a car full of 4 dudes. We watched them get out of the vehicle. They went up to a semi-truck and they basically carjacked the semi-truck. So they took the 2 Iraqis out of the semi-truck, the driver and passenger. They stuffed them in the back of the trunk of the car. 2 guys got in the car. The other 2 guys got in the semi-truck. Semi-truck went one way, the car went the other, and we went, well, guess we're doing a hostage rescue for a couple of Iraqis. So literally within 9 minutes of these 2 shitheads kidnapping 2 random Iraqis and stealing their truck, we had stopped the vehicle, killed those 2, and I popped the trunk and let the 2 Iraqis out. And I thought, man, no wonder they think.
What did you say to him?
I don't think I said anything. There was a couple of us, you know.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, it was like, come on. And they were freaked out, like they had no idea. Like they got carjacked at gunpoint, got stuffed in a trunk, probably thought they were gonna die the next time the trunk opened, and opened the trunk and there's 2 Americans fully kitted out, standing there over top of them, helping them out. And I thought, man, no wonder the bad guys think we are the greatest nation in the world. Like, they just did this, and 9-10 minutes later, we were on them.
Yeah.
And so that was a kind of a neat point. But yeah, there was a lot of good things that happened in that stretch, a lot of bad guys taken off the map. It was a bit cathartic in that that was kind of the anger phase for me. You know, I was really upset about things that had happened in 2005 and guys that we had lost.
I mean, before we get into that, it sounds like you guys have just killed an entire deck of cards.
Yeah, easy.
Do you get numb to that? I mean, do you even fucking care anymore that, I mean, these are all key players, or is it just going to work?
I think it depends. You know, some guys get more involved in the intelligence picture and exactly who and what and why we're doing what we're doing. I think I got a little more numb as the years went by. I think there's an evolution in empathy that occurs in combat that people don't talk about very often. It doesn't mean that you're making bad decisions. It means that the decision matrix, or the amount of time that it takes you to get to that decision to pull the trigger, gets less. Some of it's, and I've said it before, like spidey sense, where you just know this is bad and your reaction times get quicker, or you feel like something's about to go bad or whatever. But some of it's just, yeah, it's just a reduction in empathy. So no, for me, they were just bad guys. You know, they were guys that were going to kill me if I didn't kill them. And I felt the same about my teammates and all the things that they were doing. So yeah, you know, like I said before, like we're the good guys, and I always felt like we conducted ourselves as such. You know, whether you're on a target and you just, you know, put some rounds in a guy, and then you picked up his young child and gave it back to the mother, in some effort of consoling the trauma that they just went through. You know, they don't know any better, but yeah, I think you do over time get a little cold and lose a little bit of empathy as time goes by, and I think that kind of happens to everybody.
Yeah. We can move on.
All right. Yeah, so that rotation, yeah, that was probably one of our better rotations, in that it was one of the healthiest cycles we ever had while we were there. You know, we were stationed in Balad. We were getting up, we were working out, we were eating 3 squares a day. We weren't doing night ops. It was all daylight stuff.
It was all daylight?
All daylight.
Wow.
And it was effective. And it, you know, it hadn't been done. Nobody done a daylight vehicle helo-borne interdiction since the one that they did in Somalia in '93, chasing Mohammed Farid Adid, you know, and or whatever the guy's name was, Otto or whoever they rolled up doing one. But yeah, it hadn't been done in a long time. It was really, really effective, not just for that rotation, but it was effective for the rotation after us. The guys continued to do it for another 60 days. So we literally like cleaned the board in terms of, you know, bad guys and influencers on the battlefield, you know, high value targets. Like we really cleaned house in about a 90-day period. For us, you know, like I told you, the fun one was the hostage rescue, but sort of towards the tail end, we had one where it was some guys that we were tracking related to AMZ, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, right? But yeah, one of the few objective names I remember, it was like Objective Mayor, but it was a daylight vehicle interdiction that turned into a full-blown daylight helo assault. And so whether they had gotten used to our pattern and activity and what we were doing to engage them, or it was just pure dumb luck, they broke off of the road that we were intending to interdict them on, and ended up pulling up to a house in a rural community, a couple of structures together, and they got out and went in the house. Well, they were fairly significant, high-value individuals, so our daylight vehicle interdiction turned into a daylight assault. So we changed course, started heading towards the objective. About 1 minute out, I was, as they say, I was like the lead nav guy. As the 2 IC on the team, my particular team was responsible for navigation to the target. whether it was a vehicle or whether it was a house or whether we were walking or whatever it was. So I was in the door of the helo. I had a tough book next to me, a laptop, running some map software tracking our location, and I had the target house pinned on there. And then we had a predator overhead. So we had a display in the helo also with what the pred was seeing. So I'm watching this, looking out the window, watching this, looking out the window, looking where the target house is, and the pilot flies right by the house. And it's out in the middle of a farm field. So I'm screaming and I'm slapping the crew chief and I'm pointing, it's right there, it's right there, it's right there. Well, the pilot's, the crew chief says something to the pilot banks hard, comes back down, sets down in the field, and the trail bird comes in, sets down behind us. Well, there's a irrigation ditch, like a great big irrigation ditch between us and the target house. And as we got out and started moving, we all collectively, it was 2.5 teams worth of guys, 2 teams worth of guys hit this ditch, and we're all just standing there because we know it's chest deep and nobody wants to cross this thing. And like a scene out of a World War II movie, our troop commander at the time goes, "Get over there." And I remember laughing because there's a bunch of commandos, afraid to cross this little body of water. But we did, and we crested the other side of the trench line. And then luckily for us, the guys just sort of starburst out of the house. And so there was a lot more than we thought. It was 8 to 10 guys, and they came out guns blazing. So as we're trying to close the distance and deal with some of them, the 2 little birds that we had in support had caught up to us because the Hawks were a lot faster than the little birds. So when it turned into a helo assault, we didn't want to waste any time. We wanted to get them while they were fresh in case they were spooked and trying to go arm themselves, which is what they did. But so as they squirted out, the little birds came in. And so there's this weird daylight thing where we're firing, maneuvering across this field towards the house as these guys go in every direction. The little birds came in with guys on the pods, and they're shooting down, and the bad guys are shooting up. One of the pilots took one through his foot, straight through his foot, didn't tell anybody, finished the whole operation. It wasn't until we got back we found out he had a bullet hole right through the bottom of his boot. Just kept flying the mission. We had another guy take one into his weapon, so it didn't penetrate his rifle, but hit him right in the rifle.
Damn.
On the pod. But so anyway, target goes down. We're all good. Everybody's okay, minus the wounded pilot. And the bad guys are all dead, but every single one of those guys had a body bomb on. Every one of them.
All of them.
Every single one was wearing a rigged body bomb. None of them detonated. The 2 vehicles that were in basically the front yard where they had parked the car were 2 of those minibuses. Both of them fully loaded with explosives. They were VBIEDs that they were getting ready to use. And the realization hit us that when we flared and turned, when we missed the target and came back in, if they would have just happened to be able to clack off one of those 2 trucks, it would have taken down both helos and probably killed everybody in our troop.
Shit.
But fortunately for us, and this is the way war goes, what's the saying? Better to be lucky than good, or whatever.
Yeah.
We were lucky that day. And the intel that came off of that, in particular, was some of the intel that was utilized to target AMZ, which we had rotated out, but the very next rotation is when they dropped all those bombs and killed him, and confirmed that he was killed. So yeah, it was a really successful rotation. Mentally, it was probably good because we were really getting after it, and we all had a lot of baggage from 05. So we were really effective. We were really engaged, and yeah, it was, and we didn't lose anybody. So it's a good trip.
Man, you've been a part of a lot of high-profile stuff.
Yeah, weird, lucky timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how it all plays out, but you look back on it and you go, wow, I got to do some significant things that not a lot of guys got to do. And to this day, now I can look back and realize how fortunate I was, not just to live through all that, but to experience all that and to do it with the guys that I did. So, yeah.
Well, it's not just luck. There's a lot of hard work that goes into getting there.
Yeah.
So.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Sean Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.